good evening, and welcome to Sky Night. The full moon is rising at sunset and lighting the sky all night long. It appears 100% illuminated in the constellation Aquarius. Please enable captions in your language for local observing cities and local times. Join us for a guided tour of tonight's whole sky. We begin with Venus glowing halfway up the southern sky, while Vega sits almost straight overhead and Albireo, Altair, and the Dumbbell Nebula shine high in the southern sky alongside Deneb. As the night deepens, Mars rises near the eastern horizon. By the time morning approaches, the Andromeda Galaxy hangs almost straight overhead, with Difta and Saturn halfway up the southern sky, the Owl cluster high in the northern sky, and Jupiter near the eastern horizon. The tour concludes with the moon crossings by satellites. Look halfway up the southern sky for Venus, a dazzling silver-white planet that outshines every star. It is visible to the naked eye and appears as a bright point near the horizon. This is the last good view before it sets. New York catches the last good view before setting at 8:05 in the evening, followed by London at 8:35 in the evening, while Los Angeles waits until 7:50 in the evening. In the fan-made Star Trek series Star Trek: New Voyages, the episode titled Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow imagines a timeline where the Romulans stopped the Federation from ever forming, and United Earth went on to colonize Venus by the mid-23 RD century. In reality, Venus is an inferno of sulfuric acid clouds and crushing pressure, so no human settlement could survive there. Almost straight overhead, you will find Vega, the brilliant blue-white star that marks one corner of the summer triangle. It is the very bright star that defines the top of the sky on summer nights. This star reaches its highest point around 9:10 in the evening in Los Angeles, New York, and London, remaining above the horizon all night. The dust disk discovered around Vega inspired the broader hypothesis that planet formation is a common phenomenon throughout the galaxy. This preceded the first confirmed exoplanet discoveries by more than a decade. High in the southern sky, locate Albireo at the foot of the Northern Cross in Cygnus. While visible to the naked eye as a golden yellow star, a small telescope splits it into a beautiful gold and blue double star. This star culminates around 10:05 in the evening in Los Angeles, New York, and London. Albireo plays a poetic starring role in Kenji Miyazawa's 1934 classic, Night on the Galactic Railroad, which features an Albireo observation station, an image later carried into the celebrated 1985 anime film. High in the southern sky, find Altair, the bright white heart of the eagle in Aquila. It forms the low corner of the summer triangle and is flanked by two fainter stars. Around 10:25 in the evening, this star reaches its greatest altitude in Los Angeles, New York, and London. Interferometric observations conducted in 1999-2000 with the Palomar testbed interferometer showed that Altair has a flattened, ellipsoidal photosphere due to its very rapid rotation. It was the first main sequence star for which such a shape was directly confirmed, with its equatorial diameter over 20% larger than its polar diameter. Tonight's featured deep sky object is the Dumbbell Nebula, a fat hourglass of glowing gas in Vulpecula. Sweep binoculars or a telescope just north of the Arrow of Sagitta, which sits below the Northern Cross. The nebula culminates around 10:30 in the evening in Los Angeles, New York, and London. Catalogued as NGC 6853, the Dumbbell Nebula resides in Vulpecula, the small and faint constellation of the Fox. Almost straight overhead, look for Deneb, the blue-white star at the top of the Northern Cross in Cygnus. It marks one corner of the summer triangle and shines across a great distance. This star reaches its highest point around 11:15 in the evening in Los Angeles, New York, and London, staying above the horizon all night. Deneb lies about 2,615 light-years from Earth. This makes it the most distant first-magnitude star visible to the naked eye in the entire sky. Near the eastern horizon, look for Mars rising as an orange-red point in Gemini. It is visible to the naked eye and stands out as a steady, reddish glow among the stars. In Los Angeles, it stands highest at 2:03 in the morning, while New York and London follow at 1:47 in the morning and 1:08 in the morning respectively. Mars, Pennsylvania, a quiet borough nestled in Butler County, is one of the few places on Earth named after the red planet, though the story of how it got its name is as murky as the Martian atmosphere itself. Some locals claim the name was chosen because the founder's wife loved astronomy, while others insist it was simply a shortened version of a friend's surname, Samuel Marshall, when the post office needed a fresh identity in 1882. Decades later, the town's unique moniker even earned it an invitation to the premiere of the Disney film Mars Needs Moms, proving that a small Pennsylvania town can indeed capture the imagination of Hollywood. Next, the crossings of Phobos and Deimos in front of Mars. Phobos makes its first crossing across the apparent disk of Mars, lasting 51 minutes. In Los Angeles, this transit occurs between 6:30 in the morning and 7:21 in the morning with Mars above the horizon. In New York, it happens between 9:30 in the morning and 10:21 in the morning as Mars is above the horizon. In London, the crossing takes place between 2:30 in the afternoon and 3:21 in the afternoon while Mars stands above the horizon. Phobos continues with its next crossing across the apparent disk of Mars, lasting 51 minutes. In Los Angeles, this event runs between 2:09 in the afternoon and 3 in the afternoon with Mars above the horizon. In New York and London, Mars is below the horizon. Phobos proceeds with its third crossing across the apparent disk of Mars, a passage lasting 50 minutes. The crossing occurs in London between 5:49 in the morning and 6:39 in the morning with Mars above the horizon, while Mars is below the horizon for Los Angeles and New York. Deimos begins its sequence with a first crossing across the apparent disk of Mars, enduring for 41 minutes. In Los Angeles, this crossing runs between 1:46 in the morning and 2:27 in the morning with Mars above the horizon. In New York, it happens between 4:46 in the morning and 5:27 in the morning as Mars is above the horizon. In London, the crossing takes place between 9:46 in the morning and 10:27 in the morning while Mars stands above the horizon. Almost straight overhead, you can spot the Andromeda Galaxy, a pale smudge of light in Andromeda. Hop from the corner of the Great Square of Pegasus along two stars to find this distant spiral galaxy. The galaxy reaches its highest point around 3:15 in the morning in Los Angeles, New York, and London, remaining above the horizon all night. The light we observe from Andromeda today left that galaxy 2.5 million years ago, meaning we are actually seeing Andromeda as it appeared during Earth's Pleistocene epoch when early human ancestors roamed Africa. High in the southern sky, find Difta, one of the 50 brightest stars in the night sky. Follow the eastern side of the Great Square of Pegasus, extended south, to reach this bright point in Cetus. This star culminates around 3:15 in the morning in Los Angeles, New York, and London. Difta, also known as Beta Ceti, is the brightest star in the constellation Cetus. It is an orange giant of spectral type K0 that has already finished burning hydrogen in its core. Look halfway up the southern sky for Saturn, a steady, unblinking golden point in Pisces. It is fainter than Jupiter, but its calm yellow glow makes it easy to identify. The planet reaches its greatest altitude around 3:25 in the morning in Los Angeles, New York, and London. Unlike most planets, Saturn would float in water if you could find an ocean large enough to hold it. The planet's density is so low that it's less dense than water. High in the northern sky, look for the Owl Cluster in Cassiopeia. Drop a short way southwest from Richba to see this cluster, where two bright stars form the eyes of a little stick figure. The cluster culminates around 3:50 in the morning in Los Angeles, New York, and London, remaining above the horizon all night. The brighter of its two eyes may be a fraud. Measurements suggest that star is much closer than the cluster and only happens to sit in front of it. In catalogs, it is listed as NGC 457. Locate Jupiter low near the eastern horizon as it rises within the constellation Cancer. It appears as a bright, steady point of light that is visible to the naked eye without any instrument. A telescope or binoculars may be used to reveal extra detail. Watch in London first at 4:01 in the morning. By 4:26 in the morning, it is New York's turn, and Los Angeles follows at 4:37 in the morning. In Arthur C. Clarke's 1971 short story, A Meeting with Medusa, an Earthling explorer descends into the Jovian atmosphere to meet a colossal, jellyfish-like native life form that floats on the planet's endless winds. The real Jupiter, however, is a crushing ball of hydrogen and helium with no solid ground to stand on, and an atmosphere so turbulent that any human visitor would be shredded long before meeting such a gentle giant, a stark contrast to Clarke's vision of a world where life thrives in the clouds. Now we turn to the crossings of Io across Jupiter's disk. Io crosses the apparent disk of Jupiter, lasting 142 minutes. In Los Angeles and New York, this transit occurs during daylight or twilight. In London, Jupiter is below the horizon. Tonight, satellites cross the moon's disk 42 times. 27 of those tracks pass close to towns and cities, and 6 tracks make up the selected near-town subset. The Tiangong space station makes the first crossing. Its ground path begins over the open Pacific at 7:37 in the evening and ends near Alcarija at 6:06 in the morning. For an observer standing on the narrow path, the crossing of the disk lasts only about 1 second. The second of the night, Hubble Space Telescope begins its ground path west of São Tomé at 9:44 in the evening and ends near Machin County at 6:06 in the morning. The third of the night, International Space Station begins its ground path northeast of Kismayo at 9:55 in the evening and ends north of Nariangri at 4:14 in the morning. The fourth of the night, the same satellite crosses again as Hubble Space Telescope begins its ground path near Butembo at 10:10 in the evening and ends east of Huda at 4:31 in the morning. The fifth of the night, the same satellite crosses again as International Space Station begins its ground path over the open Indian Ocean at 10:22 in the evening and ends west of Magadan at 4:41 in the morning. The sixth of the night, the same satellite crosses again as Hubble Space Telescope begins its ground path over the open Pacific at 10:59 in the evening and ends near Gabas at 5:22 in the morning. Thank you for joining us tonight. Subscribe to stay updated, and see you next time for Clear Skies.